Great pleasure in welcoming all of you for the Rajni Kothari Memorial Lecture. Rajni Kothari, I think, as this audience knows, was a great public intellectual and a great human being. And I'm really happy that Professor Arindam Chakrabarti, who is our chair, who holds the Rajni Kothari chair in democracy, will present this evening's lecture. So may I please invite Professor Deepak Nayyar, who will introduce Arindam, and also invite Professor Arindam Chakrabarti.
Colleagues, it is my privilege to chair this Rajni Kothari lecture that is going to be delivered by Professor Arindam Chakrabarti. He is a professor of philosophy and the director of Eastern Philosophy. Yes, I think it is.
Please raise the mic.
I beg your pardon. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Arindam Chakrabarti is Professor of Philosophy and Director of EPOC, Eastern Philosophy of Consciousness and the Humanities at the University of Mumbai. His major areas of specialization are philosophy of language and logic, metaphysics, philosophy of mind, and Indian philosophy. He has written several books, including Denying Existence. He is the co-author of several other books, Knowing from Words, Universals, Concepts and Qualities, Poha, Buddhist Nationalism, and Mahabharata Now. This evening, Arindam is going to speak on We the People, a reconsideration of what he describes as the general will. Professor Chakrabarti.
Start with two quotes. One from Udayananda, 11th century Nyaya-Vaisheshik philosopher from Mithila, and another from Montesquieu, 1748. Choice of the quotes is supposed to bespeak the topic, my stand about common sense and about desires of all. But it's also supposed to be an oblique way of indicating my method of research. Loka vyavahara siddham iti ched siddhameva tari anyato vikinchit siddhyati. If it is established by common people's usage, then it is proven. It is not as if anything can be established in any other way. Do you want to know whether the desires of each are legitimate in these things? Examine the desires of all. In preparing this lecture, in preparing this lecture, I have received so much help from Peter D'Souza, Rakesh Pandey, Prathama Bandyopadhyay, Aditya Nigam, and Abhay Dubey, that I want to say, we the speakers, instead of I the speaker. In our lecture today, we wish to explore some basic questions, attempts to answer which can start up an Indian metaphysics of politics. Just as the concept of the world, all that is the case, and the concept of being or existence are the most important concepts of ontology. The concept of people, a more or less integrated plurality of active subjects, and the concepts of authority and action. People, authority, action are the most important concepts of any metaphysics of politics. Even if we forget, as we should not, that people and demos are English and Greek words. The ontological status of people is not easy to determine. One cannot just pass the buck to set theory and reduce a people to an arbitrary set of human beings, whatever may be the membership condition. The different sorts of thread which bind different kinds of groups is amazingly hard to discern. There are two sorts of otherness or over there-ness, not here. If the subject is here, me, myself, then the other is over there. And of course there are two kinds of over theres. One which is facing me, and that's the second person, who is the addressee. And the other is not even the addressee, but the topic of discussion, who may be present or absent, he or she. There are two sorts of otherness or over there-ness ingrained in the notion of people. First, each member of the collective has to be treated as numerically and qualitatively different from another. And second, the entire community as a whole is pointed at as those people over there, even when I am one of them. When post-war Ram, king of Ayodhya, is worried that people are talking about his acceptance of demon-abducted Sita, kuch to log kahenge. Or when a political leader represents people's interest, people are beyond the control of the individual speaker or thinker. They are a they, way low. Not just a regal, prime ministerial or dictatorial ego decorated with many selfies. Even the ego of a poor, homeless person has a pull towards isolation and uniqueness when it comes to counting one's own sufferings. As I'm just reading this out, I remember that I will have more to say about the connection between the concept of Gana, which was the name of the ancient small republics in India, collections, collectivities, communities, self-ruled communities, and the verb for counting, Gananath. But right now, there is a different use of the verb Gananath which has nothing to do with counting, which has to do with deeming something to be a suffering. Dukkhe dukkam na ganayati doesn't count. If you are with a friend, then you don't count a suffering as a suffering. That famous quote, which is very profound, but has been rendered into a really sort of embarrassing cliche by Dr. Karan Singh, is that ayam nija paro vedi. This is my own, that's others. Gananath lagu chetasa. Only light, shallow people count this way. This is mine, this is me, that's others. Udara charitanam tu vasudhaiva kutumbakam. So, that's, I'm sorry to, quote that again. But Gananath is, they are not counting. So, even the homeless person has a pull towards isolation and uniqueness when it comes to counting one's own sufferings. I don't know, does that carry over to Hindi like dukh mein dukh nahi ginta? I don't think it works. Okay. In Bengali you cannot say that. Even a mass massacre or epidemic, no one suffers quite the way I do. Although everybody is suffering. Jivanananda Das expresses this isolation sensitively, but self-doubtingly, in the longish poem Bodh. Shakol loker maje boshe, the word lok, people. Amar akar mudra doshe, ami aka hotechi alada, amar chokhei shudada. Sitting in the middle of all these people, due to my own idiosyncrasy, I alone am getting isolated. Is this puzzling fog covering only my eyes? At the very end of this lecture, we shall come back to this phenomenon of felt weakness of the self. The phenomenon which makes us want to say, let me tell you how I feel, though you will not quite understand. A classic form of which is, my dear friend, there is no friend. Even this sense of insulation and particularity can be generalized, as it is in the above lines of Jivanananda, because obviously it would be a mistake, a very crude mistake, to think that Jivanananda was writing his diary about this very special sense of isolation. It would not be poetry had it been just incommunicably autobiographical. Now to come back to we the people. How is that twin otherness overcome? Overcome in the Hegelian sense of retained and transcended. When a speaker makes a first person plural out of those or these people, to refer to them as we, the people of India, how does he or she, the speaker, overcome? First, the otherness between one member and another member of the crowd. And second, the otherness of the entire crowd compared to the self. Incidentally, the same Jivanananda, it's not very well known, have spoken about how the nature of crowd is about to change. Says, Bhirer Charitra Jave Bodle. Keeping this deep difficulty in mind, I want to ask two questions in this lecture. The first question, what is the ontological status of we the people of India, who performatively utter and hereby adopt, enact and give to ourselves the Constitution? Second, can we, the people, have an agentive free will distinguishable from the will of a powerful or influential oligarchic or plutocratic few, or the negotiated amalgam, union set or intersection set of the individual wills, desires, preferences of the majority. These are the two questions. There is another embarrassingly obvious yet maddeningly difficult issue with our constitutional democracy being performed by we the people. On 26 November 1949, a collection of human beings called the Constituent Assembly agreed upon and adopted the Indian Constitution. How can their we, 65 years back, be the same as the we of the people of India? Now, 65 years later, when none of the people who uttered we the people then are alive. And if we are governed by a different we the people, how are we self-governed? We are governed by the past, we. Each member, even if in 1948-50, each member of the Constituent Assembly meant something different. Not even in 1948, meant something different by the crucial term India. People of India. A different cultural past, a different tradition, a different linguistic and class, caste, literary, religious inheritance. How can the current people of India, we who live now, identify with and feel that their we and their India are the same as ours? This is the problem of diachronic representation of the past and future, which is another central problem of metaphysics of politics, which I am setting aside for the purposes of this lecture. I just mentioned it because I have said the concept of the people, the concept of action, and the concept of authority. These are the central notions of a possible future metaphysics of politics. But I want to add the concept of the past and the reality of the past and the future to be equally crucial for metaphysics of politics. Next. Analysis of we. Can the two major elements in we, subjectivity, selfhood, first personhood, and generality or plurality, be combined? The very concept of first person plural seems to be threatened by a contradiction. Being the first person and being plural are not mutually incompatible. There is only one I for each of us, and everyone else is you, or she, or he. Unless you are consciously and wittingly suffering from multiple personality disorder, you don't have more than one I. No one does. Yet we claims to be the plural of I, plural of a necessarily singular term. We is a troubled notion. I have published a series of papers on the second person, which someday I want to bring together. But one of them, which I call Trouble with You, I start by writing, the trouble with you is that you are a self, but not myself. And the only self anyone knows is myself. That's what self means. We inherit that trouble because while pretending to be egalitarian, as if I and everyone else is of equal value, each a self, the ego inside it dominates the rest of the collective. Krishna, Radha, Arjuna, Bobby, Nawaz, Fatima, Ashley, you, I. There's only one member in this class, which is I. Thus we become we. I heard from a Samoan student in Hawaii that there is a Samoan tribe in where it's perfectly okay to say, tonight, John, Robert, you and I, all of you will drink. All of you. But this is absolutely impossible in English. You know, however Leviathan you might be. You don't say that. That's ungrammatical. To say, you name, 500 other people. At the end you name I, and you have to say we. Can there be a plural or general self? We claims to be non-individual and yet subjective. We co-opts the other in the name of an inclusive totality. You are also one of us. It says to the radically other. As the BJP propagandist goes and hugs a Banarasi maker of Banaras and says, you are us. Right? In contemporary semiotics, Benvenisti turned to the enunciation, and by doing so, to the subject producing and manipulating signs, rather than the structure of the sign itself. And this I'm quoting from a beautiful piece by Mignolo, Epistemic Disobedience, Independent Thought, and Decolonial Freedom. The pronominal system is activated in each verbal enunciation. The enunciator is of necessity located in the first person pronoun I. If the enunciator says we, the first person pronoun is presupposed in such a way that we could refer to either the enunciator and the person or persons being addressed. So I could say we here. Or I could completely exclude you guys and I could say that, my family comes from Kumilla in Bangladesh and we have always had a lot of music in the family. And this we does not include the addressed people. And the remaining pronouns are activated around the I-we enunciation. We, the people of India, could be most often an emotionally positive, prideful notion, sometimes capable of being turned into an expression of public shame or embarrassment if, for example, tomorrow the people of India start a special religious political festival of annual Modi Puja or Narendra Navami. And we could say, we, the people of India, are ashamed. Or it could be an effectively neutral expression. Of course, one has to remember the shame would be deeply patriotic. Bobby Jindal cannot be ashamed of India's corrupt politicians or open sewers, ever. Analysis of we the people who decide to do something. When we add people who enact a constitution and give it to themselves, to the already troubled we, a second wrinkle seems to happen, and another contradiction looms. Only individuals can really desire, prefer, choose and act. I can be a chooser. You or she can be an agent. Even a Niradhar beggar on the street, if he has an Aadhaar card, can be a chooser. Who said beggars not be choosers? A multitude can end up bringing about a change or happen to do something, but cannot decide or choose to do something. The answer to this is Rousseau's concept of general will, which bites the bullet and says, who says only an individual can be an agent? The general has a will. To be distinguished sharply from the general's will. If only a concrete embodied particular can be a desiring free agent, how can an abstract generality like we the people have a will to do anything, even if collective action can be ascribed from outside to a mob or a group? For example, a few hundred people pulverize the mosque. You are describing a mob from outside. In being constrained or influenced by others, inside my group or community or society. And remember, influence is a powerful constraint on our pre-social individual desires and preferences. How can each one of us be free when we are acting together? Either in a concerted or in a conflictual fashion. Even traffic rules, 10 years back, were felt by the Delhi car owners to be so constraining and so frustratingly freedom-snatching that I saw on the red light there was one period when it said relax. You are free, just wait for this period of unfreedom of the member. And if none of the members is free, how can a set of unfree individuals be a freely acting totality of we the people? Problems with people's action. So, my answer to the question, can we do something, was an Obama line. Yes, we can. But common English words for people, let's list them. Common people, the public, voters, citizens, the multitude, the proletariat, the masses, community, even larger family. The Kurmi tribe, I'm told by Abhay Dubey, formed a political party called Apna Dal. Could people be treated as a technical term of psephology or census statistics? And at this point, I would stop talking a little bit just to take some voice rest and ask you to think and see the following images of different kinds of groups, crowds, masses. Now this comes from my daughter's new employer, Subodh Gupta, who says, there was a title here, yes, he calls it a boat, and in an NDTV interview, he explains that the ordinary people, sublog, humlog, who are all equal in using these aluminium bartans to cook and live, they are in the same boat as the babus, the bureaucrats, who sit under the fans. So that's the idea. Of course, there is a dark side to it, which somebody like Ramin would call it a bright side, which is that this boat which carries all of us in equality is the boat of death. The next one. This, I think, is a wonderful picture of a possible democratic people. Okay, each is playing a completely different game. There is, each is in that little group, they are following some rules, otherwise it should not be a game. Yes. But, nobody is, they're not trying to vote as to which game should be played, right? And 80 games people play. This is, of course, all of you can recognize. This is from Peter Royal. Very famous, I think. It could be. Now, another kind of crowd. Another kind of crowd. An all-time favorite of mine. And we the people of Paris. Right? I mean, that's not the title. Paris Jura. And next one is, of course, the potato eaters, a family. I want to stop at this a little bit. There is a subgrouping by age in this. Of course, they are equally sharing the humble meal. But there are two males with caps who might be coal miners. But when they come home, the older male is trying to offer something to the older female. So there are some interesting ties of friendship and intimacy, which I think this painting, and I would say this is not just a film. When we think about new ways to think of we the people, I think we should think of all this variety of cementing, of coming together. And next one. Of course, Hussein's Indian households. It's interesting that Hussein has given a newspaper named Hindu to a person who actually would never read the Hindu. So, but we could overinterpret this and say that, Hindu households are such that, extremely orthodox South Indian Brahmins would be reading a Marxist newspaper or something. And then, of course, this is you can watch, see that painting and feel we the people in a very different way. Next one. This is interesting by Gananath. About this painting, I want to ask, when I look at it, I think of the people on the balcony to be part of the people who are the rest of the time. People watching Durga Puja idol immersion ceremony by Gananath. I think they are part of the crowd. Lots of people are watching Visharju of the goddess. But I think those people on the balcony think of these people as people, not us, but they are from home. And they think, okay, look at those people watching. So they are outside, and they are there. So already inside the crowd, inside the total totality of people, there is and of course the focus is something else. Next one. Now, this is the most astounding picture of we the people. The people who adopted the American Constitution, we the people of America. But this is happening in a closed room. Forget about the Native Americans, but even the founding fathers representing which people of America are they representing? I mean, we know the history, and it's a glorious history. And of course, Tocqueville would critique it and describe it, sometimes very gracefully. And Declaration of Independence by John Turnbull. But this is also a sense of we the people. Literally, this is the we the people which adopts the American Constitution. Okay, but if you ask them, who do you mean? They would definitely not say, as Professor Nayyar was telling me, that we the people should be inclusive. And this is the inclusiveness of. But when, if the people inside this room said, not only do we include all the settlers from England and France, but we include the Native Americans also, that would be a little bit too much inclusiveness, I think. And next one. Now this I find, people around the Kaaba in Mecca, is the individuality of each of them important? We Muslims, centering around, and of course, when they go back within Muslims, they would form a subgroup of elite. We Hajis, we have done the Hajj. The next one. Now that's another we the people, again divided between those who are behind Lenin, literally in the painting, and also, organizationally behind Lenin, and those who are in front of Lenin. And there is a little more distinctiveness among those who are behind, and that seems like an undifferentiated mass. People cannot be a homogeneous, undifferentiated mass. Oh, sorry, I think I have another one, a couple of more. So this is few people who destroyed the mosque. Can we just point at them now and say, well, those people destroyed the mosque? Sometimes, at least in 1991, and later on for a long time, I had felt that we, the people of India, destroyed the mosque. And I don't know how to get away from that. It seems that the we of these few people sort of comes and swallows us somehow, much as we'd want not to be swallowed by that. Let's see the next one. This, of course, is familiar. Us and them, the exclusion which is going on, and then the next one, which is the most efficient. This is how India would look when it is the skill capital of the world. It's, look at the skill and the perfect order. I mean, if you had good governance, you would get. Next one. Now, this is what, when I told Peter D'Souza on the phone that I have included Gandhi's funeral procession picture, he said that's the only one, which is the picture of people, we the people of India. People cannot be a homogeneous, undifferentiated mass. Heterogeneous plurality is a necessary condition of being a people. And this plurality, my white-Indian friend Prabal Das Gupta insisted, is not merely that of many points of view. It is a non-propositional, non-truth functional, in Prabal's words, traffic of crisscrossing tastes. A traffic of tastes. In a robust democracy, this agonism of affects should be as chaotic and bottleneck-prone as traffic in Jahanbegloo. When, as against the BJP, VHP militant Hinduism, Kansiran issues the counter-militant Dalit clarion call to reject the 3 T's of Tilak, Taraju and Talwar, what happens is not a head-on collision, but a successful, unexpected overtaking in the traffic of tastes, by which the marginal Harijan first becomes the majority Bahujan and then overtakes more and consumes the Sarvajan, where Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya begin to look like just an erstwhile hegemonic Alpajan in the corner of the Sarvajan. If debates within the Dalit Bahujan, we the Dalit, do not flourish, then of course the traffic of feelings would come to a standstill. Witness Rancière. The place where the people appear is the place where a dispute is conducted. The political dispute is distinct from all conflicts of interest between constituted parties of the population, for it is a conflict over the very count of those parties. It is not a discussion between partners, but an interlocution that undermines the very situation of interlocution. Democracy thus sets up communities of a very special kind, polemical communities that undermine the very opposition of the two logics, the police logic of the distribution of places and the political logic of the egalitarian act. This is from his book, Disagreement. And next. Common, like the word ordinary or humdrum, has an unmistakably denigrating use. It is like the Sanskrit word prakrita, which Sita used in the Ramayana Uttarakhand, actually Lanka, to castigate Ram, when in front of everybody Rama ordered an Agni Pariksha. And Sita said, "You are talking to me like a common male, prakrita amiva, a lowly male." When Rama cast doubt on her purity after waging an honor war to rescue her from Ravana, the abductor, its Sanskrit counterpart, sadharana and samanya, are both used with an aspersion of inferiority in Bangla. The moment you say samanna, it means a little bit. And the moment you say sadharana, you just mean mediocre. Hence, asadharana, extraordinary, and asamanna becomes standard praise words. But, and aside here, Rabindranath Tagore has one of the most melting but astute poem about a long, in his later life, called Shadaram Me, about an ordinary girl. But in Abhinavagupta's aesthetics, depersonalization, sadharanikaran, making it common, is essential for personal emotions to be transformed into aesthetic rapture, which in turn yields poetic insight into truth. The common, the plebeian, the quotidian, universal, if not imposed from above, but self-examining, emerging from below, is more truth-prone than the expert superthinker's reasoned consensus. Hindi and Sanskrit words for people. We could have spent a lot of time discussing this. I had the pleasure of discussing each of these words with both Rakesh Pandey and my Farsi specialist Sanskritist Balaram Shukla, who is here from, and with Abhay Dubey. Lok, in Sanskrit, Loka, jana-gan, and gan, and prajaa, jantaa, mahajan, panchajan, bahujan, a phrase apparently first invented by Jyotiba Phule, humlog, admi. About just a note about the word panchajan. Balaram Shukla gave me this page from Yaska's Nirukta, the science of etymology, which lists Manushyanamani, all the words synonyms for human beings. And it starts with Manushya, plural. And then, as in plural, the singular word Nara. There is another version which says Nara and Naraha both. But it's interesting, it's like the English man. So Manushya and then Naraha. And then Jantaa, Vishaha, Krishtaya. The word Krishti is nowadays used for culture. But here it is for people. And then Jagatah, Dastusha. And there are some actual tribes which are named Yagava, Vratya, Turvasha, Matya. And then the most interesting word, Panchajana. And what does Panchajana mean? I think it's a concept which survives in the contemporary Indian concept of Panchayat. And the odd number, Pancha, obviously points to decision-making ability of a certain group in case of a difference of opinion. Even without an Adhinayaka, can jana-gan have a real mana? A mind of one's own. Modern India's patriotism and socialism, its democracy and scientific temper have all been taken from the very them from whom Indians were coming out. In contrast to which, India's We the People of India has been formed. And as a result, even the concept of We the People and people who swear by it by coming down to earth. Okay? Of course, measuring the distance, the vertical distance by English measures as to how many meters they have come down to earth. And they have said, admi, that's who we are. And when I came to Delhi, my first time I took an auto rickshaw from Civil Lines metro station to CSDS. The auto rickshaw, I asked him, because last time when Kejriwal's government was, dissolved, they were very angry, the auto rickshaws. They said, we love him, but why did he chhod diya? But this time I asked him, and the Delhi auto rickshaw wala in 2015 July called even Kejriwal Kala Angrez. Why? Kala Angrez. There is a deep suspicion of educated nativists and Hindu chauvinists among the actual masses of indigenous people. The abstraction of an operator, ta, has to be noticed here in one of those words. Now, we all know that of all these words, lok is perhaps the most ancient. Okay. Of course, in the sense of a region of being, a plane of being, a location. But it's a very complicated notion, but it also means people. Prajaa, we avoid that because we think it smells of the contrast class Raja. But for that, we should even avoid the word subject, but subject is another interesting multiplicity of meaning. But the word jantaa, which is at the, right in the middle of the three words of the party, which names the party which rules the country now. That word we know. I mean, I actually grew up thinking that it's the name of a stove. Because at home, odd time tea would be made in a jantaa stove. But that is actually, it is a new word to be used in this sense. But there is an interesting fact about it coming from Tanini. Usually, ta, which in Sanskrit grammatical terminology is dal, means the general property essential to being that. For example, if you are a vidwan, you have vidvatta. If you are vagmi, then you have vagmita. That's a property, an abstraction operator. It's, ta is a Nessie word, right? It's a Ness word. But Panini has a special sutra for Jana, whereby janata does not mean the property of being a human being. It comes to mean people, the community of people. So janata means people. Now, before coming to the politics of it, just the logic of it is interesting. Because when anti-Platonism and empiricism in the logical positivist era was reigning supreme, and people never wanted to use these Ness words, like which smelled of, which was stinking of Plato, right? So you don't talk about honesty, you just talk about individual honest people. You never talk about antness, you talk about each individual ant. And a nominalist and a good Buddhist would be literally, treating each ant separately as a particular, and would not believe in, those ants, because that's really insulting. Because that appeals to every pluralization, which in Ramin is called ekasheshu, is actually appeals to the abstract quality. Because ants means, otherwise you will have to literally say ant 1, ant 2, ant 3, ant 4, and so on. Now, in logic, among the logical positives, people like Gananath, they had to reduce. They had a weapon called satya. So they said, humanness or mortality, these properties, triangleness, triangularity, these are nothing but the set of all humans. So you reduce the abstraction to the set, and thereby get some, plus points, some good marks from the nominalists. The entire class of all human beings thus came to be known as humanity. And of course, when that word is pluralized, then it becomes the name of the most neglected, outdated part of, academics and education, which of course, these are shaping, we should completely forget about. If we have social sciences, why would we got to do it? This conflation of class with class-making property is significant. At this point, I had thought that I would have the time to tell you a little bit, next one, about sort of a brief history of the concept of general will. But it's kind of boring. To me it is very exciting. And I will just tell you the exciting part. In Spinoza's ethics, famously, we have the concept that there is only one substance in the whole world. There are no two substances. Spinoza was so much of a monist. He was the sort of official card-carrying Advaitavadi of the Western philosophy. But a very complex thinker. He also wrote, and which was published posthumously in 1677. He also wrote this book, which I would urge all philosophy students and philosophy teachers to go back to these days for a good theory of democracy. And it's called Tractatus Theologico Politicus. And in that, Spinoza starts by saying that surely our intellect would be less perfect if the mind were in solitude. Notice how non-Cartesian that is. For Descartes, you have to retire from society, you have to actually close your sense organs and be alone, preferably in bed. This was Descartes' life. Okay. Alone. And preceded by a night in which Descartes had 3 dreams and did discover the foundation of all modern philosophy. I exist because I think. Right? Spinoza is very much in the rationalist tradition, but he starts by saying errors come from isolation. And then he goes on to say that initially the way to counteract the worst sentiment of all, which isolates people, envy, jealousy, and in a footnote he says jealousy of trade. By the way, about jealousy of trade, there is a very long essay of that name by David Hume much later. And which is what, world competitive market is, Hume is talking about how that's essential for Great Britain's development and growth. But Spinoza says an emotion like envy and jealousy destroys the human mind because it reinstates the greatest falsehood that I am distinct from others. And whereas for Spinoza, knowledge is that I am identical with God, who is everything. Spinoza's God is just the totality of everything with no multiplicity in it. And so he says that initially this pride and envy has to be counteracted by fear. And he talks about a republic of fear. And he puts a possible contract theory, social contract theory, as the story of forming a republic story, forming the narrative of forming a group. Otherwise you are afraid, you will not get what you need, but you cannot produce and so on. Then he says, but this will be an unstable republic. Next stage is the republic of love, from fear to love. And ultimately, challenging Machiavelli's dictum that it is better to be feared than loved, Spinoza observes, and I quote from Ethics, it is of the first importance to men to establish close relationships and to bind themselves together with such ties as may most effectively unite them into one body, and as an absolute rule to act in such a way as serves to strengthen friendship. The idea of friendship, and later on it seems Rousseau takes some of these, but then develops a notion of general will, which is quite distinctive. I'll come to that in a different context at the end of the paper. Not social contract for Spinoza, of either Rousseauian or Hobbesian variety, nor the logic of joint stock companies, but in the language of Rig Veda, Atra Sakhaya Sakhyani Janate. That seems to be the basis of the second stage, republic of love and friendship in Spinoza. Next, Hannah Arendt is a big kind of very healthy word, but I cannot resist the temptation of reading out just a small passage from the human condition, which not only like Rancière, who does it after the Iraq War, but Hannah Arendt does it many years back, decades back. She anticipates that now what is going on in the name of democracy, which certain capitalist countries are just imposing on others, which goes against the very grain of democracy which should come from inside the people. So it's like, the people of Iraq will hereby become a democracy. So there's no question of we the people. This problematic subjectivity of we is taken out. You just have a statistical, collective. But then Hannah Arendt says something which is uncannily true about the state of the democracy now. Remember the slogan, make in India. Yes. Hannah Arendt says, this attempt to replace acting with making is manifest in the whole body of argument against democracy, which the more consistently and better reasoned it is, will turn into an argument against the essentials of politics. Don't do politics. Don't talk. Baatein kam. Make. The trouble with these sorts of taciturn, skillful, growth-oriented, inequality celebrating governments which are once in 5 years of the people, and for the rest of time only for the good of the people, but not by the people. The trouble with these forms of government, which emphasize making to the neglect of acting, Hannah Arendt says, is not that they are cruel, which often they are not, but rather that they work too well. According to Ramin, in the book Hatred of Democracy, democracy is not so secretly hated these days, especially by countries and nations which spread democracy and which is just a sort of brand name for good export. Multitude and the details of it, just one little ordinary language exercise. Peter and I were discussing this, and which of the English words for people are synonyms and which are not. Like Peter was right in saying that mob doesn't belong there. Mob is not at all anything to do with mob, crowd, these are not people. But he said absolutely synonymous is the word masses. But here is a litmus test that it's not, it shows that it's not synonymous. Why? Try saying we the masses. We the people is not just idiomatic, it's absolutely central to my citizenship, Indian citizenship, we the people of India. We the masses doesn't sound right. Because we is subjectively agonistic in facing together in opposition someday the colonizers, the Ambanis and the Adanis, the Hindutvawadis, they are there, the communists, the fascists, whoever, and the politically powerful, the Brahmins, so on and so forth. Whereas Ramin says, in an even more recent book, 2010, called Dissensus on Politics and Aesthetics, he says, the people for me is the name of a political subject. Notice the whole range of meanings of just the word subject before the plurality comes. In grammar, for a sentence, it is the ruler, because the subject determines the verb. At least in English, Sanskrit, Bengali grammar. Indeed, the subject is the nominative. The subject determines how the verb will do the rest of the sentence. But in politics, the subject is subjected. Right?
Yes.
In psychology, the subject is somewhere in between. The subject on the couch, of course, pays for the living of the psychoanalyst. But it's also an object of study. But not an ordinary object. A subject who should speak for herself. And that is to say, it implies the gap between multitude and people. According to Ramin, it implies a gap with respect to every idea of the people as the gathering of parts of a population, a collective body in movement. I understand the word people in the sense of the expression we are the people used by the demonstrators in Leipzig in October 1989, who were manifestly not the people, but who enacted its enunciation and disrupted its statist embodiment. The people in this sense is a generic name for the set of processes of subjectivization. So now, the we-ness of the people, unlike masses, those masses, there is at least a possibility that I, with my subjectivity, would not only be included in the people, but I would allow and endow that subjectivity onto others in the crowd, but masses are not who I can belong to. Even if one is very much a sort of card-carrying member of the proletariat. Here I had a section in honor of my dissertation advisor, Michael Dummett, whose work on electoral reform, principles of electoral reform, draws attention to a simple distinction that many of us miss. He says that there are two purposes of a general election. When we the people vote, we sometimes conflate the two, but these are distinct and could be at loggerheads with each other. One is who shall rule, and who best represents a constituency's interest or preferences. And these are two distinct things, and in this context, I thought that I would talk about Condorcet's theorem of the jury, but I don't have the time. I think I should wind up, right? Can the general will be wrong? Now the question, remember my first question was, what is the ontological status of general will or the people? The people. And I would like to say with Rousseau that there is a distinction between what each individual person thinks they themselves and the whole masses, the people want, and what the people really want. So I treat the notion of people's choice to be a realistic notion about which people can be mistaken. It follows from all this, says Rousseau in Social Contract, that the general will is always in the right and always works for the public good. But it does not follow that the people's deliberations are always equally correct about what the general will is. It's like saying that it takes a single person, about my own state. Am I now feeling hot or cold? This subjective phenomenon, I cannot be wrong. In a deep sense, because that's how I'm feeling. But you could still say, I could make a mistaken judgment about how I think I'm feeling. So you take it to the second level. And our will is always for our own good. And this was the justification that Kant gave for a republican or a democratic government. The legislative authority, Kant says, in the Doctrine of Right, the second part of the Metaphysical Morals, the legislative authority can belong only to a united will of the people. For since all right is to proceed from it, it cannot do anything wrong by its law. Now, when someone makes arrangements about another, it can be mistaken. But when people make law about people, they cannot be mistaken. That's why the general will cannot be mistaken. But it is often deceived. And then, but only then, it seems to will something bad. The will of all, therefore, is very different from the general will. So, the plot thickens and it gets more complicated. The latter looks, general will, only to the common interest, while the former looks to private interest and is no more than a sum of particular wills. And remove from these the same wills and the pluses and minuses that cancel one another, and what is left of the particular wills add up to constitute a general will. Now here it sounds like Rousseau is saying the more number you can gather, the less is the chance of error. That's not true. That's why we needed to talk about Condorcet's theorem. If the probability of each voter choosing with two outcomes, one let us say called the right outcome, the other the wrong outcome, if the probability of each voter choosing the wrong outcome is more than half, more than 0.50, then the more number you add to the voters, the more wrong the election results would be with regard to, whether it is getting the general will, capturing the general will, the general interest. Next slide. Next slide. Yes. If the populace held its deliberations on the basis of adequate information without the citizens communicating with one another, what emerged from all the little particular wills would always be the general will. So it's like you don't first, collude and conspire. Let's all vote together for something. But when plots and deals lead to the formation of partial associations at the expense of the big association, the will of each of these associations, the general will of its members, is still a particular will, so far as the state is concerned, so that it can then be said that as many votes as there are men is replaced by as many votes as there are associations. So you can see a distrust of political parties in Rousseau, who is such a great promoter of democracy. The particular wills become less numerous and give a less general result when you have cartels and pre-arranged associations. And when one of these associations is so great as to prevail over all the rest, the result is no longer a sum of small particular wills, but a single particular will. And then there is no longer a general will. And then it becomes the general's will. Now I have come to the sort of Indian part of what can be. Let's go to the next one. Right. In Advaita Vedanta, in a likely place, we have a concept of a collective. Literally, the word samashti. This distinction is made with regard to different manifestation of ignorance. Now, ignorance is not a negative term necessarily in Advaita Vedanta, because the world is made of it. The world is made of positive ignorance. And especially our buddhi, our antakarna, our sense organs, all the cognitive apparatus that we have, which have nothing to do with consciousness in Advaita Vedanta. Consciousness is covered by different kinds of nets or different kinds of masks. And when it wears the crudest, thickest sort of veil of ajnana at the individual level, then we say we are awake. And we see each other and we construct a world which, according to Shankaracharya, is illusory from the ultimate point of view. Then, when we sleep and dream, that is called Sukshma Sharira, subtle body. A little subtler, all the memories come. And there is a Swapna world, which is of course uncommon between one individual and another. And then there is deep sleep, in which we encounter pure ignorance, because we wake up and say, I didn't know anything, I couldn't see anything, I couldn't feel anything. But we also have bliss, because that is the thinnest sort of nightwear, as it were, of the self, through which the blissful nature of Atman sort of shines forth. But this story is told phenomenologically in the individual level. Corresponding to that, there is a cosmic story, and this is called Vyakti and Samashti. Now, you'd be surprised, what is the name of the collective ignorance? One is very tempted to say collective unconscious. When collective karana sharira limits undifferentiated consciousness, cosmic consciousness. What is that called? That's called God, Ishwar. Hence, collective ignorance in the form of total mind, and this is a concept you find in Spinoza. Total mind, common mind, subtle body, not of mine or yours, but of the world, of the cosmos, where the cosmos is kind of dreaming, and in the mental world, psychological, intellectual, antakarana, but not my antakarana, individual jivas, but world antakarana. That is called, notice the word, I have used this word in the introduction today, the thread that binds. The word for that entity is called Sutratma. The thread which holds together all the minds. And this is called the golden egg, the Hiranyagarbha, who has a collective ego and playfully says, I am not having fun alone. Bahujan prajaa, which shows that we is the primary concept. We is not put together by individual bits getting together and thinking our self-interest will be better further if we made a contract and let's make a we. But we is a common mind. Aristotle in the De Anima comes somewhat close to this notion when he talks about sensus communis, but gives it up completely. The person who picks it up is Aristotle's great commentator, Ibn Rushd, Averroes. He wrote 3 commentaries on the same book, De Anima. Middle commentary, large commentary, and the small commentary. In the middle commentary, he says there is a common public mind through which should run the state, and just leaves it there. At this point, we have to ask a question. What about the I? Let's go. So, the people in general is not an abstraction. I is an abstraction. People in general is the concrete whole. Now, this will sound terribly communitarian and totalitarian and all that. And to counteract that, my section which I skipped on Hannah Arendt, we have to talk about not totality, but plurality. The individuals, separately, like the bridal scene of people playing. Right? But a great Advaita philosopher, who is his own person, neither east nor west, called K.C. Bhattacharya, who wrote, by the way, much else besides Swarajin ideas. And he asked this question: is I, the first person singular, a proper name or a common noun? And he answers unambiguously, I is a common noun. Like the word unique. I think that's a staggeringly creative insight. So unique, as every common noun, can be pluralized. Think about the plural, uniques. Uniques of the word unite. Right? That's how it should be. Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi urged us to sell off our knowledge and substitute and buy the doubt and distress of questioning, Hairani. Although I am far from clear how sharing of desires, thoughts and responsibility for action and sharing a future with the yet unborn generation of people is at all possible, I want to end with the hope that we, the people of India, should lose our violent progress and cruel efficiency, which has to be always purchased at the cost of increasing inequality, and in exchange we shall gain a shared future of equality through a disputatiously chaotic creativity. Thank you. This was supposed to be another example of a crowd. Let's see the video. Just a very short 2 minutes. This is very well known. It's as much of a cliche in America as Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is here, but it's not what it's saying. I just want to see the similarity with Gandhi's funeral and also the dissimilarity.
As the greatest demonstration of freedom in the history of our nation.
Now this is what I mean by uniques, duality. Because they're doing their own thing, each person.